Imagine building a mountain from stone. Not a monument, a sacred mountain, carved by human hands over 37 years. No mortar, no iron, just millions of sandstone blocks fitted so perfectly a knife blade can't slip between them. Then imagine that mountain standing for 900 years, surviving empires, religions, wars, and jungle. Tonight, Angkor Wat, the temple that refused to die. Let me take you to the land that would become Angkor, centuries before the great temple rose from the earth. This is the 11th century, and the region we now call Cambodia is already ancient, already layered with human history going back thousands of years. This isn't empty land waiting for civilization. This is land that has known human footsteps, human prayers, human dreams for millennia. The Angkor Plain, where the temple will stand, is a place of water and forest. The Tonle Sap Lake to the south swells and shrinks with the seasons, its waters rising during monsoon rains, falling during the dry months. This rhythm of water defines everything: when to plant rice, when to harvest, when to prepare for flood, when to worry about drought. The people who live here understand water not as background, but as the fundamental force shaping existence. These people are the Khmer, and they've been building kingdoms in this region for centuries. Not primitive villages, sophisticated civilizations with irrigation systems, trade networks, religious traditions, political structures. By the 11th century, the Khmer Empire is already powerful, already wealthy, already accomplished in architecture and art. But they haven't yet built their masterpiece. They haven't yet imagined Angkor Wat. The religious landscape is complex, layered, syncretic in ways that will seem strange to people from monotheistic traditions. The ancient animist beliefs, the worship of spirits in trees, rivers, mountains, haven't disappeared. They've been absorbed into newer religions. Hinduism arrived centuries ago, brought by Indian traders and priests. The Khmer adopted Hindu gods, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, but they didn't abandon their older beliefs. They merged them, created something uniquely Khmer. The concept of the God King, the Devaraja, is central to Khmer political and religious thought. The king isn't just a political ruler. He's a divine being, or at least semi-divine, a link between heaven and earth, between gods and humans. When the king builds a temple, he's not just creating a place of worship. He's building a residence for the gods, a sacred geography that mirrors the cosmic geography, a piece of heaven manifested on earth. Mount Meru is the cosmic mountain at the center of Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. It's where gods dwell, the axis around which the universe revolves. The great ocean surrounds it, the continents extend from it. Everything in creation is oriented toward Mount Meru. This cosmology will shape Angkor Wat's design profoundly. The temple won't just represent Mount Meru, it will be Mount Meru, brought from mythological space into physical reality. In the early 12th century, the Khmer Empire is entering its golden age. The king, Suryavarman II, comes to power around 1113 AD. He's young, ambitious, militarily successful, religiously devoted. His name means protected by the sun, and he's a devotee of Vishnu, the preserver god in the Hindu trinity. Previous Khmer kings mostly favored Shiva. Suryavarman's devotion to Vishnu is strong enough to shape his reign, his wars, his legacy. Suryavarman looks at the temples built by previous kings and thinks, I will build greater. I will create something that surpasses everything that came before. Not from ego alone, though ego is certainly present, but from genuine religious devotion. He wants to honor Vishnu. He wants to ensure his own immortality, his place in history and heaven. He wants to demonstrate the Khmer Empire's power and sophistication to the world. The site is chosen carefully. The Angkor Plain offers advantages: relatively flat land, proximity to water sources, connection to existing settlements. But the specific location for Suryavarman's temple is selected for spiritual and practical reasons. The land is auspicious, according to Brahmin priests who read signs and consult sacred texts. The logistics work. Stone can be transported here, workers can be housed and fed, the necessary resources are available. The vision is audacious. This won't be a small temple or even a medium-sized one. This will be the largest religious structure in the world, a title it still holds 9 centuries later. The temple will cover 162.6 hectares, about 400 acres. The moat surrounding it will be 190 meters wide, wider than many rivers. The central tower will rise 65 meters into the sky. The galleries will stretch hundreds of meters, covered in intricate bas-reliefs telling stories from Hindu mythology. Planning such a structure requires knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, engineering, art, logistics, management. The Khmer have all of this. They've been building temples for centuries, each generation learning from the previous, refining techniques, advancing capabilities. But Angkor Wat will push everything to new levels. The precision will be extraordinary. The scale will be unprecedented. The artistic achievement will be unmatched. The architectural plan embodies religious cosmology. The temple's 5 towers represent the 5 peaks of Mount Meru. The outer wall represents the mountains at the edge of the world. The moat represents the cosmic ocean. Every measurement has significance. The distances between elements, the heights of towers, the proportions of galleries. This isn't arbitrary design. This is sacred geometry. Mathematics in service of theology. The decision to face the temple westward is unusual. Most Hindu temples face east toward the rising sun. Angkor Wat faces west toward the setting sun. Some scholars think this is because the temple was designed as a funerary temple for Suryavarman, and west is associated with death in Hindu cosmology. Others think it reflects Vishnu's particular associations. The true reason may be lost to history, but the westward orientation makes Angkor Wat distinctive from the beginning. The planning phase takes years. Architects draw plans, engineers calculate what's possible and what's necessary. Artists design the bas-reliefs that will cover the walls. Administrators organize the logistics. Where will stone come from? How will it be transported? Where will workers live? How will they be fed? How will the massive labor force be managed? This isn't spontaneous construction. This is organized, systematic, carefully planned. The stone will come from Nam Kulen, a mountain about 40 kilometers northeast of the building site. The sandstone there is perfect, hard enough to be durable, soft enough to be carved, beautiful in color and texture. But 40 kilometers is a significant distance when you're moving millions of tons of stone using only human and animal power, using only pre-industrial technology. The workforce will be enormous. Estimates suggest 300,000 workers and 6,000 elephants involved in the construction over the decades it takes to complete. Not all working simultaneously, the numbers vary by construction phase, but the total human effort is staggering. These workers aren't slaves in the brutal sense, but they're not free volunteers either. They're conscripted labor, peasants fulfilling obligations to the king, workers devoted to a sacred project that will outlive them by centuries. Around 1113 AD, the actual construction begins. The first stones are laid, the first prayers are said. The massive, multi-decade project that will create Angkor Wat is underway. Suryavarman II is young, healthy, confident he'll see his temple completed.
He doesn't know that the temple will take longer than his reign, longer than his life.
He doesn't know he'll die before seeing his dream fully realized. But he knows he's starting something that will matter, something that will last. The workers begin with the moat. Digging a moat 190 meters wide and 1.5 kilometers long on each side is itself a massive undertaking. They're moving earth by hand, using baskets and primitive tools. The excavated earth is used to raise the temple platform above the surrounding plain, ensuring the temple won't flood during monsoon seasons. The moat isn't just decorative or symbolic, it's also practical, providing water for the temple complex and helping regulate the water table. As the moat takes shape, the foundation platform is built. The base on which Angkor Wat will stand must be absolutely solid, capable of supporting millions of tons of stone for centuries. The ground is prepared meticulously. Sand is laid, compacted, leveled. The precision is remarkable. The temple's foundation is leveled to within centimeters across the entire massive structure. This precision without modern surveying equipment is testimony to Khmer engineering skill. Then the stones begin arriving from Phnom Kulen. The logistics are extraordinary. The sandstone blocks are quarried at the mountain, shaped roughly into the forms needed, then transported 40 kilometers to the building site. Some stones travel by river, floated on rafts. Others travel overland, dragged by elephants and workers. The journey takes days or weeks, depending on the route and the size of the stones. Some blocks weigh several tons. At the construction site, the stones are shaped precisely to fit their intended positions. The Khmer builders use a technique where stones are fitted together so perfectly that no mortar is needed. The stones hold themselves in place through precision cutting and careful placement. This technique means the structure can flex slightly during earthquakes without collapsing. The stones can move minutely, but remain interlocked. It's brilliant engineering that modern architects still admire. The work is slow, painstaking, demanding. Every stone must be cut correctly. Every placement must be precise. Mistakes mean rework, wasted effort, delayed progress. The workers develop incredible skill through repetition. The stonemasons who shape blocks at the quarry become masters of reading stone, knowing exactly where to cut. The builders who place stones at the site develop an eye for perfection that no modern tool can replicate. Years pass. The temple rises slowly from the earth. First the outer galleries, then the inner structures, then the towers reaching toward heaven. The work continues through dry seasons and monsoons, through years of plenty and years of hardship. Workers grow old on this project. Some die and are replaced by their sons, who continue the work. This is multi-generational construction, a sacred project that transcends individual lifetimes. The vision is becoming reality. The dream is becoming stone. And Angkor Wat is beginning its 900-year journey through time. The construction of Angkor Wat is not just building. It's creating sacred space, manifesting heaven on earth, translating theological concepts into physical reality. Every element of the temple's design carries meaning that goes far beyond aesthetics or engineering. To understand Angkor Wat is to understand the world view of the people who created it. The temple complex is oriented with extraordinary precision. The main axis runs east-west, aligned with the equinoxes. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sun rises directly behind the central tower when viewed from the western causeway. This isn't accidental. The Khmer were sophisticated astronomers who understood celestial mechanics and incorporated that knowledge into their architecture. The temple is a calendar, an astronomical observatory, a tool for tracking the cosmos. The proportions of Angkor Wat encode sacred numbers.
The distances between elements reflect cosmological measurements from Hindu texts. The temple's design incorporates the Yuga system, the Hindu conception of cosmic ages. The measurements relate to the solar year, the lunar month, the astronomical constants known to ancient Indian mathematics. Angkor Wat is mathematics made visible, sacred geometry realized in sandstone. The 5 towers represent the 5 peaks of Mount Meru, with the central tower being the highest, most sacred point. These towers are prangs in Khmer architecture, corncob-shaped towers that taper as they rise, covered in intricate carvings, topped with lotus bud finials. The central tower rises 65 meters above the temple platform, dominating the skyline, visible for miles across the flat Angkor plain. The galleries that surround the temple's core create layers of sacred space, each layer more holy than the previous as you move inward. The outer gallery, with its famous bas-relief walls, is accessible to common worshippers. The middle gallery requires greater purity. The inner gallery, surrounding the central towers, is accessible only to priests and royalty. This graduated sanctity reflects Hindu temple principles, the Holy of Holies at the center, progressive stages of approach for those of different spiritual status. The bas-reliefs covering the gallery walls are masterpieces of narrative art. They stretch for hundreds of meters, telling stories from Hindu epics, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata. The Battle of Kurukshetra is depicted in incredible detail. Thousands of figures, elephants, chariots, warriors, gods watching from above. The churning of the ocean of milk shows gods and demons working together to create the elixir of immortality, a 49-meter-long panel of extraordinary complexity. These reliefs aren't just decoration. They're sacred texts in stone, religious instruction for a largely illiterate population. You can read the stories by walking along the walls, following the narratives carved in stone. The artists who created these reliefs were telling the most important stories their culture knew, preserving them in a medium that would outlast any manuscript, any oral tradition. The level of detail in the carvings is astonishing. Individual figures have distinct faces, expressions, postures. The gods are shown with their traditional attributes: Vishnu with 4 arms, Shiva with his 3rd eye, Garuda, the bird god, with wings spread. The demons have fangs and fierce expressions. The apsaras, celestial dancers, move with grace and sensuality, their jewelry and clothing rendered with incredible delicacy. There are over 3,000 apsaras carved throughout Angkor Wat, each one different from the others. They represent divine feminine beauty, celestial entertainment, the pleasures of heaven. Their artificial hairstyles, jewelry, and dance poses show the Khmer ideal of beauty. Looking at these carvings 900 years later, you can still see the artist's skill, their ability to make stone seem soft, to capture movement in static material. The construction techniques remain impressive even by modern standards. The stones are fitted so precisely that you can't slip a knife blade between them. No mortar, no iron reinforcement, just perfect cutting and placement. The weight of the stones holds them in position. The interlocking creates strength. The entire massive structure is essentially a precisely balanced stack of rocks. But what rocks, and what balance? The workers use a technique called corbelling to create the vaulted ceilings inside the galleries. Stones are laid so each course extends slightly beyond the previous one, gradually closing the gap until the vault meets at the top. This creates beautiful arched ceilings without true arches, a distinctive feature of Khmer architecture. The spaces inside feel grand, sacred,
perfectly proportioned, even though the engineering is relatively simple.
Water plays a crucial role in the temple's function and symbolism. The moat isn't just a boundary, it's a reflection pool that doubles the temple's visual impact. On calm days, Angkor Wat's towers are reflected perfectly in the moat's still water, creating a mirror image that makes the temple seem to float between earth and sky. This effect is intentional, adding to the temple's otherworldly, sacred character. The hydraulic engineering is sophisticated. A system of channels, ponds, and reservoirs manages water throughout the complex. During monsoon season, the system prevents flooding. During dry season, it provides water for the temple's needs. The Khmer were masters of water management, living in a land where water's presence or absence meant survival or disaster. Their temples incorporated this knowledge, creating sustainable water systems that functioned for centuries. The temple's decoration includes symbols that encode religious meaning. The lotus appears everywhere, on tower finials, in carved details, in the shape of architectural elements. In Hindu and Buddhist thought, the lotus represents purity, spiritual unfolding, the soul rising from muddy material existence toward enlightenment. The prevalence of lotus imagery reinforces Angkor Wat's function as a place of spiritual transformation. Naga serpents, multi-headed cobra-like creatures from Hindu-Buddhist mythology, appear as balustrades on causeways and staircases. The Naga represents water, fertility, protection, the connection between earthly and divine realms. Grasping the Naga balustrade as you ascend the temple stairs symbolizes the spiritual journey from the mundane world to the sacred space of the gods. The windows throughout Angkor Wat use stone balusters instead of glass, vertical stone columns carved in distinctive patterns. These provide ventilation and light while maintaining the sacred separation between inside and outside. The patterns cast beautiful shadows, creating ever-changing light displays as the sun moves across the sky. The interior spaces are never completely dark or completely bright. They exist in a sacred half-light that encourages contemplation. The acoustics in certain parts of the temple are remarkable. Stand in specific locations and clap your hands. The sound echoes in a way that resembles a bird call or a musical note. Whether this is intentional acoustic engineering or happy accident isn't clear, but it adds to the temple's mystical character. Ancient visitors might have interpreted these unusual sounds as evidence of divine presence. As construction progresses year by year, Angkor Wat becomes the center of an enormous support system. Workers need to be housed, fed, clothed, equipped with tools. Artisans need workspace for carving. Engineers need to coordinate thousands of workers. Priests need to ensure the temple is being built correctly according to sacred specifications. The construction site is a city unto itself, a massive temporary settlement supporting the permanent temple rising at its center. The economic impact on the Khmer Empire is significant. Resources that might have gone to other purposes, military campaigns, other construction projects, luxury goods for the elite, are diverted to Angkor Wat. This is acceptable because the temple brings prestige and demonstrates the empire's power. A kingdom capable of building something this magnificent must be wealthy, organized, favored by the gods. The temple is propaganda, theology, and art simultaneously. Suryavarman II visits the construction site regularly. He needs to see his dream taking physical form. He consults with architects and priests, making decisions about design details, approving or rejecting proposals. This is his legacy, his gift to the gods and to posterity. He's investing everything in this temple: resources, reputation, his kingdom's labor and wealth. The temple must be perfect.
But perfection takes time. Decades pass.
Suryavarman ages.
The temple grows, slowly, magnificently, inevitably. By the 1140s, the main structure is complete. The towers rise, the galleries extend, the moat reflects. But the detailed work continues. Artisans are still carving bas-reliefs. Workers are still placing stones. The finishing touches require as much care as the foundation did. Around 1150, Suryavarman II dies. The exact date isn't known, the historical record is incomplete. But he dies before Angkor Wat is fully finished. Some bas-reliefs remain incomplete, suddenly stopping mid-scene, suggesting that work halted at the king's death. He poured his life into this temple and didn't quite live to see it completed. Did he die satisfied, knowing his legacy would stand for centuries? Or did he die frustrated, wanting just a few more years to perfect his masterpiece? The temple construction continues after Suryavarman's death, though possibly at a reduced pace. Subsequent kings complete what he started, honoring his vision even if they don't share his devotion to Vishnu. The incomplete sections remain incomplete. No later king claims Angkor Wat as their own project. It remains Suryavarman's temple, his offering to Vishnu, his bid for immortality. By the late 12th century, Angkor Wat is essentially complete. It has taken approximately 37 years to build, involving hundreds of thousands of workers, millions of stones, incalculable human effort. The result is magnificent, the largest religious structure in the world, a masterpiece of architecture and art, a testimony to human dedication to the divine. Angkor Wat stands complete, ready to begin its long journey through centuries of history, waiting to see what time will bring. What was it like to live in the Angkor region during the 12th century, when Angkor Wat dominated the landscape like a stone mountain? To understand the temple's meaning, you need to understand the daily lives of the people who prayed there, who maintained it,
who organized their existence around its sacred presence. The vast majority of people in the Khmer Empire were rice farmers. They lived in villages scattered across the Angkor Plain, in houses built from wood, bamboo, and thatch, materials that have long since rotted away, leaving no trace. This is why Angkor Wat survives while the homes of ordinary people don't. Stone preserves, wood decays. The religious architecture remains while the domestic architecture is gone, creating a skewed picture where temples dominate the archaeological record. But these farmers were the foundation of everything. Their rice crops fed the empire. Their surplus production created the wealth that funded temple construction. Their labor, through corvée service, a system where peasants owed the king a certain amount of work each year, built Angkor Wat. They weren't slaves, but they weren't free in the modern sense either. They had obligations to the king and the gods that shaped every aspect of their lives. The agricultural cycle determined the rhythm of existence. The monsoon season, roughly May to October, brought heavy rains that flooded the rice fields. This was planting and growing season. Farmers waded through water, transplanting rice seedlings, maintaining the dikes and channels that controlled water flow. The work was backbreaking, done under tropical sun and monsoon rains, but it was absolutely necessary. Without rice, there was no empire. The dry season, November to April, was harvest time and the period for other activities. Rice was harvested, threshed, stored. Taxes were collected. A portion of every harvest went to the king. This was also the season for temple construction. Workers conscripted for corvée service traveled to Angkor, worked on the king's projects, then returned home. The dry season allowed movement that the flooded wet season didn't. Water wasn't just important, it was everything. The Tonle Sap Lake to the south of Angkor is one of the most productive fisheries in the world. During monsoon season, the lake swells to many times its dry season size,
When the rains stop, the lake drains, leaving behind fish trapped in shrinking pools. This annual cycle provided enormous quantities of fish, which were preserved through fermentation and drying, becoming a protein source that lasted through the year. The Khmer developed sophisticated water management systems, reservoirs called barays, canals, dikes. The largest baray, the Western Baray, was 8 kilometers long and 2.2 kilometers wide, capable of holding 50 million cubic meters of water. These weren't just for irrigation. They were ritual reservoirs, symbolic oceans, engineering marvels that demonstrated the king's power over the fundamental element of life. Family structure was complex and fluid by modern standards. Extended families lived together or in adjacent houses. Kinship networks provided social security. If you fell ill or faced hardship, your extended family supported you. Marriage might be arranged or chosen, depending on family and circumstance. Divorce was possible. Women had more rights than in many contemporary societies. They could own property, conduct business, even serve in official positions. Children were valued, but also expected to contribute. By age 7 or 8, children were working, helping in rice fields, caring for younger siblings, learning crafts from parents. Childhood as a protected period of play and education didn't exist for most. Life was hard, and everyone had to contribute to family survival. But there was also affection, play, storytelling, the universal aspects of childhood that transcend time and culture. Religion permeated daily life in ways modern secular people might struggle to understand. There weren't clear boundaries between sacred and secular. Everything had spiritual dimensions. Planting rice involved rituals to ensure fertility. Harvesting included offerings to spirits. Illness was treated with medicine and prayer simultaneously. The gods and spirits weren't distant. They were immediate, present, involved in daily affairs. Angkor Wat was the religious center of this world. People made pilgrimages to the temple, especially during important festivals. They brought offerings, flowers, incense, food, sometimes more valuable gifts. They prayed to Vishnu for protection, prosperity, health, children. They circumambulated the temple in ritualized patterns, walked the galleries looking at bas-reliefs that told stories they'd heard since childhood, climbed the steep stairs to the upper levels to get closer to the divine. The festivals were spectacular. Thousands of people would gather at Angkor Wat for major religious celebrations. Imagine the scene. The temple decorated with flowers and colored cloth, the air filled with incense smoke, the sound of drums and gongs and chanting priests. Processions of dancers performed sacred dances. The king himself might appear, carried in a palanquin, demonstrating his divine status and his connection to the gods. The priests who served at Angkor Wat were a distinct social class. They were educated in Sanskrit, the sacred language of Hindu texts. They knew the rituals, the prayers, the proper ways to honor the gods. They interpreted omens, performed ceremonies, maintained the temple. Some lived at the temple complex permanently. Others served in rotation, returning to villages after their service period ended. The temple wasn't just for worship. It was an economic center. The temple owned land, controlled resources, employed workers. Temple dancers, apsaras in physical form, were highly trained women who performed sacred dances. Musicians played during ceremonies. Artists created decorations. All these people depended on the temple for livelihood, creating a complex economy around religious practice. Food was rice, fish, vegetables, fruit, with meat for those who could afford it. The Khmer ate 2 meals a day, one in late morning, one in early evening. They sat on mats on the floor, ate with their hands or simple utensils. The wealthy had more variety and quantity, but everyone ate basically the same foods. Regional trade brought some exotic items, spices, Chinese ceramics for the elite, textiles, but most people consumed what was locally produced. Clothing was simple. Men wore a sampote, a cloth wrapped around the waist and pulled between the legs, forming loose pants. Women wore similar wrapping plus a chest cloth. The wealthy had finer fabrics, more elaborate wrapping styles, jewelry. But the basic form was the same across classes. Shoes weren't common. Most people went barefoot. Protection from tropical sun was important. Farmers wore conical hats, sought shade during the hottest hours. Houses were built on stilts, raising the living space above ground level. This protected from flooding and provided storage space underneath. The walls were woven bamboo or palm, the roof thatch. Inside was simple: sleeping mats, cooking pots, perhaps a small altar for household spirits. Furniture in the modern sense didn't exist. People sat and slept on mats, used the same space for different purposes throughout the day. Health was precarious. Tropical diseases, malaria, dengue fever, parasites, were endemic. Childbirth was dangerous for mothers and infants. Injuries could become infected with no antibiotics available. Life expectancy was probably 35 to 40 years, though those who survived childhood might live much longer. Some people lived to 60 or 70, becoming elders whose experience and knowledge were valued. Medicine combined practical knowledge with spiritual practice. Herbal remedies were used for various ailments. Healers understood some basic anatomy and treatment. But illness was also seen as spiritual, caused by angered spirits, broken taboos, curses. Treatment, therefore, included offerings, prayers,
Rituals to appease whatever spiritual force was causing the problem. This wasn't ignorance. It was a different framework for understanding health and illness. Death was marked by elaborate rituals. Bodies were cremated, the ashes collected and buried or scattered. Funerary ceremonies involved priests, offerings, prayers for the deceased's soul. The belief in reincarnation meant death wasn't final. The soul would be reborn, hopefully into better circumstances if the person had lived virtuously. This belief provided comfort and shaped ethical behavior. Entertainment existed despite the hardships. People told stories, myths, legends, folk tales passed down through generations. Musicians played instruments, drums, gongs, flutes, stringed instruments. Dance was both entertainment and religious practice. Festivals provided breaks from work, opportunities for social interaction, celebration, joy. Life wasn't all toil. There were moments of pleasure, beauty, community. The market was the social center. People gathered to trade produce, goods, news, gossip. The market was where you heard what was happening in the kingdom, where you arranged marriages, where you settled disputes, where you simply saw people from beyond your immediate village. Markets were noisy, crowded, vibrant, the opposite of the quiet rice fields where most people spent most of their time. Living in the Angkor region meant living in the shadow of the temples, not just Angkor Wat, but dozens of other temple complexes scattered across the landscape. These stone mountains dominated the horizon, constant reminders of the god's presence, the king's power, the civilization's achievements. You grew up seeing them, praying at them, perhaps working on their construction. They were part of your world in a way no modern person can fully understand. As you drifted off to sleep in your wooden house, the temple stood in darkness, massive and silent. The stars wheeled overhead. The rice fields rustled in the breeze. Somewhere, Priests kept vigil, maintaining the sacred fires that never went out. The gods watched from their stone mountain, and you slept, knowing that tomorrow would bring the same work, the same rituals, the same rhythm that had shaped your parents' lives and would shape your children's. This was life in the age of Angkor Wat. Hard, brief, shaped by water and stone and prayer. Religion is never static, and neither was Angkor Wat.
The temple built for Vishnu would undergo transformations that its creator never imagined, adapting to new beliefs while maintaining its sacred character. This is the story of how Angkor Wat evolved from Hindu temple to Buddhist monastery while remaining essentially itself. The transition begins subtly in the late 12th century. Jayavarman VII, who comes to power around 1181, is a Buddhist, specifically a Mahayana Buddhist. This represents a shift in royal religious preference. Previous kings were Hindu, mostly devotees of Shiva or Vishnu. Jayavarman VII's Buddhism is personal and profound. He builds extensively, creating Angkor Wat and the Bayon Temple with its famous stone faces. But he doesn't destroy the Hindu temples. He lets them stand, respects them, sometimes converts them. Angkor Wat, too grand and sacred to abandon, begins its transformation. Buddhist elements are added to the Hindu structure. Buddha images are placed in galleries originally designed for Hindu deities. Some Hindu statues are modified. A Vishnu statue might be recarved to represent Buddha, or simply reinterpreted through Buddhist eyes. This isn't destruction, it's adaptation, the way religions actually evolve in practice rather than in theological treatises. By the 13th and 14th centuries, Theravada Buddhism becomes dominant in the Khmer Empire. Theravada, the way of the elders, emphasizes monastic discipline, meditation, individual enlightenment. It's less focused on gods and more focused on the Buddha's teachings on the path to nirvana through ethical living and spiritual practice. This form of Buddhism will remain Cambodia's primary religion to the present day. Angkor Wat becomes a Buddhist monastery. Monks take up residence in the galleries. The temple complex becomes a wat, a monastery temple, the same word used for Buddhist temples throughout Southeast Asia today. The architectural bones remain Hindu, but the spiritual flesh becomes Buddhist. This is religious transformation through reinterpretation rather than replacement. The bas-reliefs depicting Hindu epics aren't destroyed or defaced. They're simply understood differently. The stories of Rama and Krishna are read as moral tales, as demonstrations of virtue and vice, as artistic heritage, if not current religious practice. Buddhism is generally tolerant of existing art and architecture, seeing value in beauty regardless of its original religious context. New additions appear. Buddha statues are installed throughout the complex, some quite large and elaborate. Monks create meditation spaces in the galleries. Prayer flags and Buddhist symbols appear alongside the original Hindu carvings. The temple becomes layered, palimpsest, showing its history through accumulated religious meanings. The worship practices change. Instead of elaborate Hindu ceremonies involving multiple priests and complex rituals, Buddhist practice is simpler. Monks meditate, chant sutras, give teachings. Lay people bring offerings, flowers, incense, food for the monks. They circumambulate the temple, a practice common to both Hinduism and Buddhism, walking clockwise around sacred space as a form of devotion and meditation. The festivals shift to Buddhist ones. Vesak, celebrating Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and death, becomes a major celebration at Angkor Wat. The Khmer New Year, though originally Hindu, is adapted to Buddhist practice. Pachum Ben, the Festival of the Dead, becomes important. A time when people come to temples to make merit for deceased ancestors. Angkor Wat hosts these celebrations, its ancient stones witnessing new forms of devotion. The monks who live at Angkor Wat become its caretakers. They maintain the buildings, clean the galleries, protect the carvings. This isn't professional conservation in the modern sense, but it's care born of devotion. The temple remains sacred, so it must be maintained. The monks provide this maintenance, ensuring Angkor Wat doesn't fall into complete ruin. Education happens at the temple. Monasteries are educational centers in Theravada Buddhist societies. Young men come to Angkor Wat to be educated, learning to read and write, studying Buddhist texts, training in meditation. Some stay for life, becoming permanent monks. Others ordain temporarily, spending a few months or years as monks before returning to lay life. This educational function keeps the temple active, relevant, central to community life. The political situation around Angkor is changing during these centuries. The Khmer Empire, which was so powerful in the 12th century, faces challenges. Wars with neighboring kingdoms, the Thai to the west, the Cham to the east, drain resources. Climate change in the 14th and 15th centuries disrupts the water management systems that agriculture depends on. Some researchers think megadroughts alternating with mega-floods damaged the elaborate hydraulic infrastructure. The capital shifts. By the 15th century, the center of Khmer power moves south to Phnom Penh, closer to the Mekong River and to maritime trade routes. Angkor doesn't vanish, people still live in the region, monks still maintain the temples, but it's no longer the empire's political heart. The great urban complex around Angkor Wat gradually depopulates. People move elsewhere, seeking better opportunities or following the relocated capital. But Angkor Wat itself is never completely abandoned. This is crucial to understanding its survival. While other Angkor temples are left to the jungle, Angkor Wat remains an active Buddhist monastery continuously from the 14th century to the present. Monks live there, worship there, maintain it. This continuous occupation prevents the kind of complete jungle overtaking that happened to nearby Ta Prohm, where trees grow through the stone, roots prying buildings apart. The jungle does encroach. The outer areas of the Angkor complex become overgrown. Trees push through abandoned buildings, vines cover walls, animals make homes in human ruins. But the core of Angkor Wat, the main temple structure, remains clear, maintained, functional. You can abandon a city while keeping its cathedral active. That's what happened at Angkor. Local people continue to revere Angkor Wat even as the empire fades. It's a pilgrimage site, a place of special power, a sacred mountain that transcends political fortunes. People from villages throughout the region come for festivals, for blessings, for meditation. The temple serves their spiritual needs regardless of whether a great empire backs it with resources and organization. Stories and legends accumulate around the temple. One legend says that Angkor Wat was built by Priyaket Malaya, a divine architect, in a single night. Another says that a king built it to imprison his rebellious son. These legends aren't historically accurate, but they show how the temple lives in popular imagination, how it becomes mythologized, how it exceeds its actual history through storytelling. By the 16th century, Angkor Wat is ancient. It's been standing for 400 years, which is longer than the United States has existed today. The people who use it know it's old, know it was built by ancestors, but the specific history is becoming hazy. The inscriptions are in Sanskrit, which fewer people can read. The exact dates and names are being forgotten.
The temple is entering the realm of legend, even as it remains physically present. European explorers begin arriving in the region. Portuguese and Spanish traders in the 16th century hear about magnificent ruins in the jungle. Some visit, write descriptions that seem fantastical to European readers. A temple larger than any European cathedral, covered in intricate carvings, standing in tropical forest. It sounds like fantasy. These early European accounts are often dismissed or forgotten, lost in obscure archives. The most famous early European account is by Antonio da Madalena, a Portuguese Capuchin friar who visited Angkor Wat in 1586. He wrote that the temple was of such extraordinary construction that it is not possible to describe it with a pen, particularly since it is like no other building in the world.
This captures something essential. Angkor Wat is unique, defying easy description, exceeding expectations. Through all these centuries of change, from Hindu to Buddhist, from imperial capital to regional pilgrimage site, from active construction to ancient monument, Angkor Wat endures. The stones stand, the carvings persist, the moat reflects. The temple continues its function as sacred space, adapting to new religions and circumstances while remaining recognizably itself. This adaptability, this ability to be reinterpreted without being destroyed, helps explain its survival. The temple in the 16th century isn't the temple of the 12th century. It's been changed by time, by religion, by use. But it's still Angkor Wat. The same stones, the same sacred mountain, the same human aspiration toward the divine, made manifest in sandstone. And it will continue changing, adapting, enduring for centuries more. From the 16th to the 19th century, Angkor Wat enters what might be called its Romantic period, the time when it becomes lost in the jungle. Though this is somewhat misleading, since local people knew exactly where it was and never stopped using it. But from the European perspective, which will dominate the historical narrative, these are the centuries when Angkor Wat becomes a mysterious ruin waiting to be discovered. The jungle is always waiting. Tropical forest, given the slightest opportunity, will reclaim any human construction. The trees grow fast, their roots powerful. Vines climb walls. Moss and lichen colonize stone. Water seeps into cracks, expanding and contracting with temperature changes, slowly prying stone apart. Without constant maintenance, a building in tropical Southeast Asia can be overwhelmed by vegetation within a generation or two. But Angkor Wat never quite succumbs. The Buddhist monks continue their maintenance, limited though it is by lack of resources. They can't restore the entire complex, can't prevent all jungle encroachment. The outer areas of Angkor, the surrounding temples, the city that once existed here, are indeed being swallowed by forest. Ta Prohm becomes famous precisely because trees grow through its walls, creating that iconic image of nature reclaiming civilization. Angkor Wat itself, the main temple, remains relatively clear. The monks sweep the galleries, clear vegetation from the towers, maintain access paths. This isn't sophisticated conservation. They're not stabilizing foundations or treating stone decay, but it's enough to prevent complete overtaking. The temple remains usable, which is the monks' primary concern. They need it for worship, so they keep it functional. The political situation in Southeast Asia is tumultuous during these centuries. The Khmer Kingdom, no longer centered at Angkor, faces pressure from Thai kingdoms to the west and Vietnamese expansion from the east. Cambodia becomes a smaller, weaker state, sometimes independent, sometimes tributary to more powerful neighbors. These political struggles leave less energy and resources for maintaining ancient monuments. But this political weakness has an unexpected benefit for Angkor Wat. Because the Khmer Kingdom is focused on survival rather than transformation, there's no impulse to demolish old temples to build new ones. No king orders Angkor Wat torn down to reuse its stones. The temple is left alone, not from active preservation, but from benign neglect. It's too remote from the current capital to matter politically, too sacred to desecrate, too useful to local people to abandon. European visitors trickle through, leaving brief accounts. In the 17th century, several Europeans visit and write descriptions. Diogo do Couto, a Portuguese historian, describes the temple in his Da Asia. Marcelo de Ribadeneira mentions it. These accounts are published in Europe but don't spark much interest. They're seen as travelers' tales, exotic descriptions from distant lands, not entirely credible. The French Catholic missionary Charles-Émile Bouivot visits in 1850, and publishes an account in 1858. He describes Angkor Wat as one of the most gigantic monuments of that forest of stones. But his account is overshadowed by what comes next, the most famous discovery of Angkor Wat, which wasn't really a discovery at all, but a popularization. Henri Mouhot, a French naturalist and explorer, visits Angkor Wat in 1860. He's searching for new species of plants and animals, mapping unexplored regions, sending specimens back to Europe. When he encounters Angkor Wat, he's overwhelmed. In his journal, he writes that the temple is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome. His published accounts, complete with drawings and detailed descriptions, capture European imagination in a way previous accounts didn't. Mouhot dies in Laos in 1861, but his journals are published posthumously. They become bestsellers. The European public, fascinated by exotic places and ancient civilizations, becomes obsessed with Angkor Wat. The temple enters Western consciousness as a mysterious, lost city in the jungle, a marvel of ancient architecture, proof that civilizations can rise, flourish, and fall, leaving only ruins behind. This discovery narrative is problematic in many ways. Angkor Wat was never lost. Local Khmer people knew where it was. Buddhist monks lived there. Pilgrims visited. Multiple European visitors preceded Mouhot. But Mouhot's account is what makes Angkor Wat famous in Europe, what starts the process of archaeological investigation and eventually conservation. So his discovery matters, even if the term is misleading. The French establish a protectorate over Cambodia in 1863, 2 years after Mouhot's death. This brings Cambodia under French colonial control, which will last until 1953. For Angkor Wat, French colonialism has complex effects. On one hand, the French are interested in the temples as symbols of past glory, as archaeological treasures, as tourist attractions. They begin systematic study and conservation. On the other hand, French presence represents colonial exploitation, Western appropriation of Cambodian heritage. The École Française d'Extrême-Orient, French School of the Far East, is established in 1900, with responsibility for researching and conserving the Angkor temples. French archaeologists, architects, and historians begin serious study. They clear vegetation, stabilize structures, document carvings, create archaeological maps. This is the beginning of modern Angkor Wat conservation, applying scientific methods to preserve the temples. That conservation is complicated. Early efforts sometimes do more harm than good. Clearing all vegetation seems logical, but can actually destabilize structures. Some trees that grew through walls are actually holding them up, and removing them causes collapse. Restoration attempts using concrete or wrong materials damage original stonework. Conservation is a learning process, and the early conservators learn through mistakes. The photography of Angkor Wat transforms how it's perceived. Early photographers like Emile Gazelle and John Thompson capture the temples in the 1860s and 1870s. Their photos show the temples in their jungle setting, mysterious, romantic, overgrown. These images shape Western understanding of Angkor Wat as a lost city, even though by the time photos are being taken, French colonial authorities are very much present. Tourism begins, though it's limited to wealthy adventurers willing to undertake difficult journeys. Reaching Angkor Wat requires traveling to Cambodia, then making an overland journey through challenging terrain. Accommodations are primitive, the journey is expensive and time-consuming. But for those who make it, Angkor Wat is breathtaking, more impressive in person than any photograph or description could convey. Local Cambodians have complex feelings about this sudden foreign interest in their temples. On one hand, there's pride that outsiders recognize the magnificence of Khmer civilization. On the other hand, there's resentment at colonial appropriation, at foreigners claiming credit for discovering what was never lost, at seeing their sacred sites become tourist attractions. The monks continue their religious practices amidst increasing tourist presence. This creates tension. The temple is simultaneously an active monastery and an archaeological site. Monks want to worship. Tourists want to photograph. Archaeologists want to excavate. These purposes don't always align smoothly. Rules are established about where visitors can go, when they can visit, how they should behave in sacred space. World War I and World War II temporarily reduce foreign attention to Angkor Wat. French resources are directed toward the wars. Tourism stops. Conservation work slows. The temples are left more to the monks and local people during these decades. After World War II, as Cambodia moves toward independence from France, Angkor Wat becomes a symbol of national identity. When Cambodia gains independence in 1953, Angkor Wat becomes central to national self-conception. The temple appears on the national flag, the only nation with a building on its flag. This isn't arbitrary symbolism. Angkor Wat represents Cambodia's glorious past, proof that Cambodian civilization achieved greatness, a source of pride and identity for the newly independent nation. The 1960s see increased tourism and conservation efforts. Cambodia, under Norodom Sihanouk, promotes Angkor Wat internationally. The temples are marketed as must-see destinations. Infrastructure improves, better roads, basic hotels, trained guides. Angkor Wat is becoming accessible to middle-class tourists, not just wealthy adventurers. The modern tourism industry at Angkor begins, but disaster is approaching. The Vietnam War spills into Cambodia in the late 1960s. By 1970, Cambodia is engulfed in civil war. The Khmer Rouge comes to power in 1975, beginning one of the 20th century's worst genocides. An estimated 1.7 to 2 million Cambodians die under Khmer Rouge rule from 1975 to 1979. The country is devastated, infrastructure destroyed, society shattered. Angkor Wat survives the Khmer Rouge period, but barely. The temple isn't deliberately destroyed. Even the Khmer Rouge recognize its symbolic importance, but it's neglected. Tourists disappear, conservation stops. Some minor looting occurs. Landmines are placed in the area, making it dangerous to access parts of the complex. The temple weathers this period as it has weathered previous catastrophes, by enduring, by remaining solid stone while human dramas play out around it. The Vietnamese invasion in 1979 ends the Khmer Rouge regime, but Cambodia remains unstable through the 1980s. Civil war continues. The country is impoverished, isolated internationally, struggling to recover from genocide. Angkor Wat remains mostly inaccessible to foreigners during this period. The temples stand silent, surviving but not thriving, waiting for peace to return. The 1990s bring relative peace to Cambodia and mark the beginning of Angkor Wat's transformation into a global heritage site and mass tourism destination. In 1992, UNESCO declares Angkor a World Heritage Site, recognizing its outstanding universal value and committing international resources to its preservation. This designation changes everything, bringing both benefits and challenges that continue to shape the temple today. International conservation teams arrive, bringing expertise, funding, and modern techniques. The restoration work is more sophisticated than early French efforts. Ground-penetrating radar reveals subsurface structures without excavation. Laser scanning creates precise 3D models. Chemical analysis identifies the best materials for restoration. Teams from Japan, France, India,
Germany, China, and other nations work on different sections, each bringing specialized knowledge. The Archaeological Survey of India works on the main temple, focusing on structural stability and stone conservation. Japanese teams restore the Bayonne Temple and other structures. French experts continue work begun a century earlier. This international collaboration means Angkor Wat benefits from global expertise, though it also raises questions about who controls Cambodia's heritage and whose interpretation of that heritage is prioritized. The challenge of conservation is immense. The sandstone is deteriorating from natural weathering, wind, rain, temperature changes. Biological growth, algae, lichen, moss, discolors and damages stone. Previous restoration efforts using incompatible materials have caused problems. Groundwater changes related to modern development are affecting foundations. Tourism itself causes wear. Millions of footsteps on ancient stones accelerate erosion. Modern conservation philosophy emphasizes reversibility and minimal intervention. Additions should be removable if future understanding suggests different approaches. Original material should be preserved wherever possible. New materials should be compatible with old. The goal is to stabilize and preserve, not to rebuild or heavily restore. This approach respects the temple's age and authenticity. The tree issue becomes emblematic. At Ta Prohm, the trees growing through walls are iconic. The jungle temple appears on countless postcards and in films like Tomb Raider. But trees destroy structures. Roots pry stones apart. Weight crushes walls. Conservation teams face difficult decisions: remove trees to save the structure, or preserve trees as they've become integral to the site's identity. Different temples receive different answers. At Angkor Wat proper, the decision is clearer. The temple has been kept relatively clear of major vegetation for centuries by monks. Conservation continues this approach, removing trees and large roots that threaten structural integrity, while accepting that some biological colonization, moss, small plants, is inevitable and doesn't necessarily harm the stonework. Tourism explodes. In 1993, about 7,000 foreign tourists visited Angkor. By 2019, before COVID-19, that number had grown to 2.6 million foreign visitors annually, plus millions more domestic tourists. This brings desperately needed revenue to Cambodia. Tourism accounts for significant GDP, but also creates enormous pressure on the temples. The main threats from tourism are physical wear, environmental stress, and cultural impact. Millions of feet wear down stone steps and floors. Body heat and breath raise humidity levels inside galleries, damaging carvings. Touching stones transfers oils and acids that accelerate deterioration. The sheer number of people changes the experience. What was once contemplative and spiritual becomes crowded and commercial. Management responses include visitor limits, restricted areas, designated pathways, time slot bookings during peak periods. The highest levels of the central temple are periodically closed to reduce wear on the steep staircases. Some delicate bas-reliefs are protected behind barriers. Guides are trained to educate tourists about respecting sacred space. The commercial development around Angkor Wat raises concerns. Siem Reap, the gateway town, has transformed from sleepy village to bustling tourist city. Hotels, restaurants, bars, shops proliferate. Infrastructure, Roads, airports, water, electricity, strains to keep up with growth. The temple's setting changes from rural agricultural landscape to tourist-oriented development. Culturally, there's tension between the temple's religious and tourist functions. For Buddhists, Angkor Wat remains a sacred monastery, a place of pilgrimage and worship. Monks still live there, ceremonies still occur. But for tourists, it's primarily a historical site, a photo opportunity, an item to check off a bucket list. These perspectives sometimes conflict. Tourists, in revealing clothing, noisy groups, lack of respect, offend religious sensibilities. Cambodian authorities try to balance these competing interests. The temple complex is managed by Apsara, Authority for the Protection and Management of Angkor and the region of Siem Reap, which coordinates conservation, tourism, and community concerns. Dress codes require covered shoulders and knees. Quiet zones are designated. Certain times are reserved for religious ceremonies. Finding the right balance is ongoing work. The question of authenticity becomes complex. What is the authentic Angkor Wat? The 12th century Hindu temple? The Buddhist monastery it became? The jungle-covered ruin of the 19th century? The restored monument of today? Each period represents a genuine stage in the temple's life. Modern Angkor Wat is all of these simultaneously. Layered, palimpsest, simultaneously ancient and constantly renewed. Digital technology creates new ways to experience Angkor Wat. Virtual reality reconstructions let viewers see the temple as it might have looked when newly built. Augmented reality apps overlay historical images on present-day views. Photogrammetry creates detailed 3D models. These technologies make the temple accessible to people who can't travel to Cambodia, while raising questions about whether virtual experience is meaningful or just diminishes the real thing. Climate change poses new threats. Rising temperatures increase stone weathering rates. Changing rainfall patterns, more intense monsoons alternating with severe droughts, stress the temple's water management systems. Extreme weather events become more common. Long-term projections suggest that without intervention, climate change could seriously damage the temples within this century. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 to 2021 essentially stops tourism. Angkor Wat sees the fewest visitors in decades. This has complex effects. Economically, it's devastating for the region. Thousands of jobs lost, businesses failing. But environmentally, the temple gets a break. Stone wears less without millions of footsteps. Humidity levels drop. Conservation teams work without crowds. Nature reasserts itself slightly. The pandemic demonstrates the danger of overdependence on tourism. When tourism stops, the local economy collapses. This has sparked discussions about sustainable tourism, limiting numbers, raising prices, distributing visitors across more sites, developing alternative economies. The goal is making Angkor Wat tourism sustainable long-term, not maximizing short-term revenue at the expense of the temple's preservation. Local communities' relationship with Angkor Wat is complex. For centuries, villages existed around the temples, rice fields among the ruins. Conservation efforts sometimes displaced communities, prioritizing preservation over local livelihoods. This creates resentment. Outsiders telling Cambodians they can't farm land their ancestors farmed for generations, that the temples are too important for local needs to matter. More recent approaches try to be community inclusive, employing local people in conservation and tourism, sharing revenue with local communities, involving villagers in decision-making, recognizing that temples exist in a lived landscape, not as isolated monuments.
The challenge is respecting local needs while preserving global heritage. Education becomes crucial. Teaching Cambodian children about their heritage creates cultural connection and future stewards. Training Cambodian conservators builds local expertise. Providing information to tourists encourages respectful behavior. Education operates at multiple levels, trying to ensure everyone, local, national, international, values and protects Angkor Wat. The question persists: who does Angkor Wat belong to? Cambodia as the nation where it stands, the Khmer people as descendants of its builders, all of humanity as a World Heritage Site, Buddhism as an active monastery, tourists who fund its preservation through their visits. The answer is probably all of these, which makes management complicated, but also rich with meaning. As the 21st century progresses, Angkor Wat continues adapting. New technologies aid conservation. Tourism evolves toward sustainability. International cooperation brings resources and expertise. Local communities find their voice. The temple endures, as it has for 9 centuries, as it hopefully will for many more. The stones stand. The carvings persist. The sacred mountain continues its journey through time. Stand in Angkor Wat at dawn, and you're experiencing something that has happened countless times over 9 centuries. The sun rises behind the eastern gallery, light gradually illuminating the temple, bringing the stone to life. This isn't just beautiful. It's designed to be beautiful, intentionally aligned so this moment happens precisely this way. The 12th century builders knew what they were creating, knew it would outlast them, knew people centuries later would stand exactly where you're standing and feel exactly what you're feeling. The stones remember, in their way. Not consciously, stone doesn't think or feel, but the stones carry history in their substance. Chemical analysis shows where they came from, how they weathered, what they've been exposed to. Physical examination reveals tool marks from the carvers, showing ancient techniques. The carvings themselves are memory made permanent. Stories from Hindu mythology preserved in sandstone, readable 9 centuries later. Think about what these stones have witnessed. They've seen empires rise and fall. They've felt the prayers of Hindu devotees and Buddhist monks. They've heard thousands of languages: Sanskrit, Khmer, Chinese, Portuguese, French, English, Japanese, and countless others. They've survived wars, weather, neglect, and obsessive attention. They've been sacred temple, jungle ruin, archaeological site, tourist attraction, living monastery. And through it all, they've remained essentially themselves. The lesson of impermanence is written in stone, which is ironic. We build in stone to last, to defy time, to achieve permanence. But even stone changes. The carvings that were sharp in the 12th century are softer now, worn by weather and time. The foundations that were level are settling unevenly. The towers that stood perfectly straight lean slightly. Stone lasts longer than wood or flesh, but it doesn't last forever. Everything is temporary, even stone mountains. But there's also a lesson about endurance. Angkor Wat has survived 9 centuries. That's longer than most human institutions, longer than most nations, longer than most religions in their current forms. The temple has outlasted the empire that built it, the religion it was built for, the dynasty of its builders. It has endured through changes that would destroy something less solidly built or less deeply meaningful. What allows this endurance? Partly it's engineering. The temple is extremely well built, foundations solid, stones precisely fitted, structure stable. Partly its adaptability. The temple has been reinterpreted by different religions, used for different purposes, valued for different reasons across centuries. Partly its continuous care. Someone has always valued Angkor Wat enough to maintain it, whether medieval monks or modern conservation teams. But most fundamentally, Angkor Wat endures because it matters. It matters religiously, still an active monastery, still sacred space. It matters nationally, symbol of Cambodia, source of pride and identity. It matters globally, testament to human creativity and devotion, evidence of what humans can achieve when they commit to building something greater than themselves. The temple teaches about human ambition. Suryavarman II dreamed of building a sacred mountain, and he did it. The project took decades, employed hundreds of thousands of people, consumed enormous resources. It was audacious, possibly arrogant, definitely ambitious. But the result is magnificent. Sometimes human ambition creates terrible things: war, exploitation, destruction. But sometimes it creates Angkor Wat. The lesson is that ambition itself is neutral. What matters is what we aim toward. The temple also teaches about collective effort. No one person built Angkor Wat. Suryavarman conceived it, but thousands of workers quarried the stone, transported it, carved it, placed it. Artists created the bas-reliefs. Engineers designed the structure. Administrators organized the logistics. Monks maintained it afterward. The temple is the achievement of a civilization, not an individual. Great things require collective effort, sustained over time. There's a lesson about beauty mattering. The builders could have created a simpler, more functional temple, but they chose beauty, intricate carvings, perfect proportions, elegant details. They spent enormous effort on aesthetics that don't affect structural function. This suggests that beauty isn't frivolous. Beauty serves a purpose. It elevates the spirit, honors the divine, creates meaning beyond mere function. The care taken with every apsara carving, every lotus motif, every proportional relationship, shows that beauty matters deeply to human flourishing. The temple demonstrates the power of place. Angkor Wat isn't just a building, it's a sacred landscape, a geography of devotion. The moat, the causeway, the galleries, the towers, each element contributes to the experience of approaching and entering sacred space. You don't just arrive at Angkor Wat. You progress through stages of increasing holiness. This understanding of place, of how physical environment shapes spiritual experience, is profound. There's wisdom in the temple's adaptability. Angkor Wat transitioned from Hindu to Buddhist without losing its essential character. This shows that sacred space can be flexible, that different religions can honor the same stones, that change doesn't necessarily mean destruction. In a world often divided by religious conflict, Angkor Wat demonstrates that sacred spaces can be shared, reinterpreted, valued across religious boundaries. The temple also teaches about memory and forgetting. For centuries, the detailed history of Angkor Wat was forgotten. The names of its builders, the specific dates of construction, the precise purposes of various elements, all lost. But the temple itself remained, and eventually, through archaeology and epigraphy and historical research, much of that history was recovered. The lesson is that physical evidence can preserve memory even when written records and oral traditions fail. But some things remain mysterious. We still don't know exactly how the Khmer moved multi-ton stones 40 kilometers without modern technology. We don't know the specific meaning of every carving.
We don't know precisely how the temple functioned in daily religious life. Some mysteries may never be solved. This is okay. Mystery is part of the temple's power. Complete knowledge might actually diminish it. Some things are meant to remain partly unknowable. The economic lesson is complex. Building Angkor Wat required enormous wealth, extracted through taxation and labor obligations from peasants who had no choice. The temple represents exploitation as well as achievement. But it also created employment, demonstrated capability, produced something that has generated value for centuries through tourism and cultural pride. Was the cost worth it? From whose perspective? These questions don't have simple answers. There's an environmental lesson, too. The Khmer developed sophisticated water management systems, living in harmony with seasonal flooding and drought. But eventually, possibly, environmental stress contributed to Angkor's decline. Whether climate change or system degradation or both caused the eventual abandonment of Angkor as capital. The lesson is that civilizations dependent on precise environmental management are vulnerable to environmental change. This feels relevant in our era of climate change. The temple teaches about cultural continuity and change. Modern Cambodia is profoundly different from the Khmer Empire of the 12th century. Different language, Khmer evolved. Different religion, Buddhism instead of Hinduism. Different political system, constitutional monarchy instead of god-kings. Different economy, tourism and garments instead of rice and tribute. But there's also continuity. The same people in the same land, speaking a related language, practicing a related religion, looking to Angkor Wat as their heritage. Finally, Angkor Wat teaches about silence and speaking. The temple is silent. Stone doesn't talk. But it speaks through its existence, its beauty, its endurance. It speaks different messages to different people. To the devout, it speaks of the sacred. To the tourist, of wonder. To the historian, of the past. To the Cambodian, of identity. To the conservator, of responsibility. To the poet, of impermanence and meaning. The same stones speak differently depending on who's listening. These lessons aren't written on signs or in guidebooks. They're implicit in the stones themselves, in the temple's history, in the experience of being there. You can visit Angkor Wat and miss them entirely, seeing only an impressive old building. Or you can visit and receive them. Let the temple teach what it's been teaching for centuries to those willing to listen. The stones remember, and in remembering, they teach. Not through words, but through presence, through the simple fact of still standing after 900 years, still beautiful, still sacred, still meaningful. This is the deepest lesson. That human creations, when made with skill and devotion and care, can transcend their creators and their era, can speak across centuries, can continue mattering long after everything that seemed important in their own time has faded away. As evening comes to Angkor Wat, the tourists leave. The gates close. The temple returns to quietness, to the monks who live there, to the darkness that has fallen on these stones thousands of times across 9 centuries. This is the Angkor Wat most visitors never see. The temple at night, empty, silent, breathing. The last light fades from the western sky, turning it orange, then pink, then purple. The stones that have absorbed sunlight all day begin releasing that heat slowly into the cooling air. If you could touch them, they'd be warm still, holding the day's light as a kind of gentle memory. This is physics, of course, thermal mass, radiation, basic thermodynamics.
but it feels like something more, like the stone's remembering warmth. The security guards begin their rounds. They walk paths worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, checking that no one has stayed behind, that everything is secure. Their flashlights create moving pools of light in the darkness, illuminating a column here, a carving there, bringing individual elements briefly into visibility before darkness returns. The guards know the temple intimately, every passage, every turn, every place where tourists get lost or rules get broken. The bats emerge at dusk, swooping through the galleries, hunting insects attracted to lights. These bats have lived at Angkor Wat for generations, probably centuries. The temple provides perfect habitat: dark spaces, high ceilings, stone crevices for roosting. Their echolocation clicks echo through the stone corridors, a natural sound older than human presence here, continuing unchanged while empires rise and fall around them. The monks prepare for evening prayers. Those who live at Angkor Wat maintain a rhythm of devotion: morning prayers, midday meditation, evening chants. The sound of their chanting drifts through the galleries, mixing with night sounds, bats, insects, distant traffic from Siem Reap. The chants are in Pali, the sacred language of Theravada Buddhism, words that have been chanted for 2,500 years, connecting these monks across time to the Buddha himself. The moon rises, and Angkor Wat transforms. Moonlight doesn't illuminate like sunlight. It creates a different world, one of silver and shadow, mystery and beauty. The bas-reliefs that seemed clear in daylight become ambiguous, harder to read, their stories less literal and more suggestive. The apsaras seem to move in flickering moonlight, their dance becoming real for a moment before settling back into stone. The moat reflects the moon, doubling its light, creating a path of silver across the water. This reflection is what the temple's designers intended: water as mirror, the earthly reflecting the heavenly, the physical world showing traces of the sacred. On still nights, when the water is perfectly calm, the reflection of the temple is so clear, you can't tell which is real and which is reflection, which is stone and which is light. The stars appear, more visible here than in light-polluted modern cities. The constellation the Greeks called Orion, the Khmer knew by different names but saw in the same stars. Humans across cultures and centuries have looked at these same stars, finding different patterns, telling different stories, but all sharing the experience of standing on Earth, looking up at infinity. Temperature drops as night deepens. The tropical day's heat dissipates. A breeze comes up, moving through the galleries, creating sounds, whistles, sighs, murmurs. These acoustic effects are partly architecture, partly nature. Air moving through stone corridors, around columns, through window openings, creates music of sorts. Not intentional music, but not entirely random either. The temple breathes in its way. The jungle around the temple is active at night. Angkor Wat may be clear of major vegetation, but it's surrounded by forest. That forest is noisy. Cicadas, frogs, night birds, mammals moving through undergrowth. The sound is constant, a chorus of life that has continued since before humans existed, that will continue after. The temple stands in this living landscape, stone amid growth, permanence amid change. Occasionally, animals enter the temple grounds. Deer sometimes wander through the outer galleries. Wild pigs root around the moat edges. Monkeys, if they're feeling bold, explore the ruins. Snakes, mostly harmless, occasionally dangerous, navigate the stone passages. The temple belongs to these creatures as much as to humans. They don't care about its history or significance. To them, it's just environment, habitat, another part of the landscape. Lightning bugs, fireflies, darts in the darkness around the moat. Their bioluminescent flashes create a moving constellation at ground level, points of light appearing and disappearing randomly, beautifully. Children across cultures have been enchanted by lightning bugs for probably as long as humans have existed. The monks at Angkor Wat watch them on warm nights, perhaps finding in their impermanent light a metaphor for consciousness, for the brief illumination of individual existence against vast darkness. The stone lions that guard the temple entrances seem different at night. In daylight, they're clearly stone, clearly art, clearly inanimate. But in darkness and moonlight, they seem more alive, more vigilant. This is human psychology, our tendency to see life in shapes, to animate the inanimate. But it's also something true about art. Well-carved stone does seem to have presence, personality, something that exceeds mere material. Inside the galleries, darkness is absolute. No light penetrates. The space becomes pure geometry. You know the walls and ceiling are there because you can't move beyond them, not because you can see them. This is the darkness humans knew for most of history, before artificial light. This is the darkness the temple's builders knew, the darkness monks meditated in for centuries. It's not frightening. It's enveloping, complete, strangely peaceful. The carvings continue their stories in the darkness, unseen but present. The Battle of Kurukshetra still rages on the eastern gallery wall, whether anyone is there to see it or not. The apsaras still dance. The gods still churn the ocean. The stories persist, independent of viewers, which is oddly comforting. The world continues, whether we're watching or not. Life goes on in the darkness. At the highest level, the central tower rises into the night sky. This is the symbolic peak of Mount Meru, the axis of the universe in Hindu-Buddhist cosmology. Standing here at night, you can almost feel the mythology becoming real. This does feel like the center of something, like a point connecting earth and heaven, like a place where the boundaries between physical and spiritual become permeable. The clouds move across the moon, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow. The whole temple becomes a sundial of sorts, marking the passage of night through the changing patterns of moonlight and shadow. Time becomes visible, tactile, something you can watch moving across stone. Around 3 a.m., the quietest part of night, the temple reaches its deepest stillness. Even the jungle sounds diminish. The monks are sleeping. The guards have settled into their stations. The animals have finished their most active hunting and feeding. The world pauses, breathes, rests. This is the hour when the temple feels most itself, most independent of human interpretation and use. It's not a tourist site or archaeological monument or active monastery right now. It's just stone, arranged in patterns, occupying space, existing. This existence precedes meaning. Before anyone decides what Angkor Wat means, before anyone uses it for anything, it simply is. And that being, that simple presence, is perhaps the most fundamental thing about it. Then, toward dawn, the world begins stirring again. Birds start their morning songs, tentative at first, then building to full chorus as light approaches. The monks wake for morning prayers. The guards prepare for the day shift changeover. The bats return to their roosts. The deer slip back into the forest. The night is ending. The eastern sky begins to lighten, almost imperceptibly at first, gray creeping into black. Then the first hints of color, deep blue, then lighter blue, then pink. The stars fade. The moon sets. And once again, as it has for 9 centuries, as it will for centuries more if we're wise, the sun rises behind Angkor Wat. The light touches the highest tower first, turning the stone from gray to gold. Then it spreads downward, illuminating level by level, bringing the temple back into visibility. The carvings emerge from darkness, the galleries fill with light. The moat reflects the growing day.
Angkor Wat returns to the world of the visible, the knowable, the human. But it carries the night with it somehow. In full daylight, you can still sense the darkness that lives in the stone, the silence that exists beneath the tourist noise, the mystery that persists despite archaeological knowledge. Angkor Wat is simultaneously completely visible and utterly mysterious, fully known and deeply unknown, entirely present and somehow distant. This is the paradox of sacred space. It's physical and metaphysical simultaneously, stone and symbol, place and idea. You can measure every dimension, map every carving, analyze every stone. But you can't capture what makes it sacred, can't quantify its presence, can't explain in purely material terms why standing here moves people to tears or prayer or silence. 900 years. Think about that span of time. 900 years ago, there was no printing press, no gunpowder in Europe, no universities in their modern form. The Crusades were ongoing. Genghis Khan hadn't yet been born. Most of the world we know today didn't exist. But Angkor Wat was being built, and it's still here. What does it mean for something to last 9 centuries? It means surviving not just years, but eras. Surviving not just weather, but civilizations. Angkor Wat has witnessed the complete transformation of human life multiple times over. The world of its builders, pre-industrial, pre-modern, pre-almost everything we take for granted, is gone. But the temple remains, connecting that lost world to ours. The temple has seen technologies come and go. It was built without iron tools, without wheels for transportation, without pulleys or cranes in the modern sense. It has witnessed the invention of gunpowder, the printing press, the steam engine, electricity, automobiles, airplanes, computers, the internet. Each technological revolution that transformed human life washed over Angkor Wat, leaving the stones essentially unchanged. It has seen religions rise and transform. Built for Hinduism, adopted by Buddhism, observed by Christians and Muslims and atheists and spiritual seekers of every stripe. Every major religion currently practiced on Earth has been represented among Angkor Wat's visitors. The temple has been prayed to by people who believe in thousands of gods. One God, no gods. It accepts all these prayers equally, being stone and therefore without theological opinions. The temple has witnessed empires. The Khmer Empire that built it fell. The Thai kingdoms that surrounded Cambodia rose and transformed. The French colonial empire came and went. The Japanese Empire briefly occupied Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge tried to remake Cambodia entirely. The Vietnamese intervened. The modern Cambodian nation emerged. Through all these political transformations, Angkor Wat stood, outlasting every political structure that tried to claim or control it. It has seen languages evolve. The Sanskrit of its inscriptions is no longer spoken. The Khmer language has changed significantly. French was imposed, then faded. English has become dominant for tourism. The temple's stones have been described in hundreds of languages, interpreted through thousands of different linguistic lenses. But the carvings themselves are a universal language. You don't need words to understand that the apsaras are beautiful, that the battles are fierce, that the gods are powerful. The temple has experienced climate change before anyone called it that.
The medieval warm period, the Little Ice Age, the modern warming, all have brought different temperature and rainfall patterns to Angkor. The temple has weathered it all, though not without effect. Climate shapes stone through freezing and thawing, wet and dry, expansion and contraction. 900 years of weather leaves marks. It has been interpreted endlessly. As Hindu temple, Buddhist monastery, archaeological site, national symbol, tourist attraction, World Heritage Site, architectural marvel, engineering achievement, artistic masterpiece, religious destination, historical record, cultural touchstone. Each interpretation is valid, but none is complete. Angkor Wat exceeds any single interpretation, containing multitudes, being all these things simultaneously, and also something more that resists categorization. The temple has been a mirror for every age that has encountered it. Medieval pilgrims saw divine presence. Colonial explorers saw evidence of lost civilizations and exotic mystery. Modern archaeologists see engineering and cultural achievements. Tourists see beauty and Instagram opportunities. Monks see sacred space. Cambodians see national identity. Everyone sees something different, and everyone seeing is shaped by their own time and culture. But through all these interpretations, the temple remains itself. It doesn't change to accommodate our understanding. We change our understanding to try to accommodate it. This is humbling. The realization that Angkor Wat will outlast our interpretations of it. But whatever we think it means, future generations will think it means something else, and the temple will be indifferent to all our meanings. The temple teaches patience through its very existence. It was built slowly over decades. It has aged slowly over centuries. There's no rushing stone, no accelerating monuments. Everything about Angkor Wat happens on geological time rather than human time. In our era of instant communication and rapid change, there's something profound about encountering something that operates on such a different timescale. The restoration work continues, slowly, carefully, respectfully. Conservation teams work year by year, stone by stone, addressing problems, stabilizing structures, preserving carvings. This work will never be finished, because stone is always weathering, always changing, always needing attention. The conservation teams understand this. They're not trying to fix Angkor Wat once and for all. They're entering into a relationship with the temple that will last as long as humans care about preserving it. Some of the conservators have worked at Angkor Wat for decades. They know individual stones, remember which ones were treated when, can identify problems at a glance. They've developed a relationship with the temple, know its quirks and vulnerabilities. They're not just workers, they're caretakers, continuing a tradition of care that goes back to medieval monks that hopefully will continue far into the future. The question of how long Angkor Wat can last has no simple answer. The stones won't last forever. Even stone erodes eventually. But with proper care, the temple could stand for centuries more, possibly millennia. The greatest threats are probably human-caused: war, neglect, inappropriate development, climate change. If humans protect Angkor Wat, it will outlive us. If we don't, it won't. This creates a strange responsibility. Every generation that inherits Angkor Wat also inherits the obligation to pass it on to the next generation in good condition. We're links in a chain of stewardship that extends backward 9 centuries and hopefully forward many more.
What we do now, how we conserve, how we visit, how we value the temple, affects not just our experience, but the experience of people not yet born. The temple has witnessed human nature in all its complexity. It has seen devotion and desecration, care and neglect, wisdom and foolishness. It has seen people at their best, creating beauty, preserving heritage, seeking meaning, and at their worst, warring, destroying, exploiting. Through it all, the stones have remained neutral, recording everything, judging nothing. There's a Zen koan that asks, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Angkor Wat poses a different question. If a temple stands for 9 centuries and everyone sees something different in it,
What is the temple, really? Is it the physical stones, the meanings people project onto it, the accumulated history it carries? The answer is probably yes to all of these. The temple is simultaneously material and immaterial, object and symbol, stone and story. The future of Angkor Wat is uncertain in details, but certain in outline. The temple will continue standing. People will continue visiting. Conservation will continue. Interpretations will continue evolving. New challenges will arise: climate change, technological change, political change, cultural change. The temple will adapt and endure, as it has for 9 centuries. Someday, far in the future, Angkor Wat may finally fall. Stone erodes, earth shifts, everything ends eventually. When that day comes, centuries or millennia from now, the temple will have stood longer than most human creations, will have meant something to countless people, will have connected past and future in ways few things can. Its eventual falling won't negate its standing. The fact that nothing lasts forever doesn't make temporary existence meaningless. But that day isn't today. Today, Angkor Wat stands. The stones hold their stories. The carvings continue their dances. The towers reach toward heaven. The moat reflects the sky. Monks pray. Tourists marvel. Conservators work. The temple breathes in and out, with the suns rising and setting, with the seasons turning, with the slow, patient rhythm of stone time. Now, as you prepare for sleep, let Angkor Wat accompany you into the darkness. Not the temple of tourists and cameras, but the temple of stillness and stone. The temple that exists in the quiet hours when human voices fade and only the essential remains. Picture the temple at midnight. The galleries are empty. The courtyards are still. The moon casts silver light on ancient stone, creating patterns that have repeated themselves thousands of times across 9 centuries. This moment, moonlight on stone, silence in sacred space, has happened before and will happen again. You're part of something larger than yourself, larger than your moment in time. The stones are cool now, having released the day's heat into the night air. They rest in their way, returning to equilibrium, preparing for tomorrow's sun. There's a rhythm to this, heat and cool, day and night, light and dark, that has continued since the temple was built, that will continue as long as stones stand. Your own breathing slows to match the temple's rhythm. In, out. Slow, steady, patient. There's no hurry at Angkor Wat. The stones have waited 9 centuries. They can wait a little longer. Time moves differently here, stretched out, less urgent, more spacious. You can feel this spaciousness entering you, slowing you, calming you. The temple teaches rest through its own stillness. Stone doesn't rush. Stone doesn't worry. Stone simply is, existing from moment to moment, accepting whatever comes, rain, sun, wind, time, without resistance. This acceptance isn't passivity. It's the deepest form of strength, being so solid, so grounded, so fundamentally yourself that nothing can move you from your essential nature. Think about the monks sleeping in their quarters at the temple. They've lived with these stones, prayed among them, maintained them, found meaning in them. For them, Angkor Wat isn't exotic or mysterious. It's home, familiar, ordinary even in its extraordinary beauty. They sleep peacefully, surrounded by 9 centuries of history, protected by walls that have protected so many before them. The apsaras carved in stone continue their eternal dance in the darkness, unseen but present. Their grace doesn't depend on being witnessed. They were beautiful when carved. They're beautiful now. They'll be beautiful centuries from now if the stone lasts. Beauty exists independent of viewers, which is a profound thought. The world is full of beauty whether we notice or not.
The stories told in bas-reliefs continue playing out on the gallery walls. Gods and demons churn the ocean. Warriors fight their eternal battles. Kings process in endless ceremony. These stories are frozen in time, but also somehow alive, animated by the imagination of everyone who reads them, continuing through new interpretations by each generation of viewers. Let your mind wander through the temple in imagination. Walk the causeway from the western entrance, cross the moat, pass through the outer gallery. The stone is cool beneath your feet. The air smells of tropical night, flowers, earth, distant rain. The darkness is complete, but not frightening. You're safe here, in this sacred space, under these ancient stones. Climb the steep stairs to the upper levels. Each step brings you higher, closer to the symbolic peak of Mount Meru, closer to the divine. The physical effort of climbing becomes meditation, each step a prayer, each breath an offering. You're following a path millions have followed before you, connecting across time through shared experience. At the top, the central tower rises into the night sky. Stars wheel overhead in their eternal dance. You're at the center of the universe, or at least at a point designed to represent that center. The symbolic and actual overlap here. This is both a stone tower in Cambodia and the cosmic mountain at the center of existence. Both are true simultaneously. The wind moves across the temple, carrying sounds from the surrounding jungle. Nightbirds call, insects chorus, leaves rustle. Life continues around the temple, indifferent to its sacredness, just being alive in the way life is. This is comforting, the realization that the world continues, that life persists, that existence goes on whether we're paying attention or not. Your breathing has become very slow now, very deep. Each breath brings in peace, releases tension. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind is learning to rest. The temple, in its patient stillness,
teaches rest to those willing to learn. Rest isn't doing nothing. It's being completely present in the moment, accepting what is, letting go of what isn't. The temple will be here tomorrow. The stones will stand. The carvings will persist. The moat will reflect. This reliability is soothing. In a world of constant change, here is something that changes so slowly it seems eternal. Not actually eternal, nothing is, but close enough to eternity that human lifetimes disappear against it. Think about all the people who have slept near this temple across 9 centuries. Kings and peasants, monks and soldiers, pilgrims and tourists, locals and foreigners. All of them eventually slept as you're sleeping now. All of them eventually died as you will die. But the temple remains, connecting all these temporary lives through its semi-permanent presence. This should be sobering, but somehow isn't. There's comfort in being part of something larger than yourself, in knowing your small life is connected to this vast sweep of history. You matter because you're part of the story, even if you're just one person among millions who have encountered this temple. The darkness deepens. Your awareness fades. The boundary between waking and sleeping becomes unclear, permeable. Are you in your bed or at Angkor Wat? Are you in the present or the past or some timeless space where all moments exist simultaneously? It doesn't matter. Rest is rest, wherever it happens, whenever it happens. The temple breathes with you, in, out. Stone and flesh, breath and stillness, ancient and immediate. You're connected now, linked across 9 centuries, part of the endless chain of people who've found meaning in these stones. This connection persists even as consciousness fades, even as sleep claims you. Let the weight of 900 years of history hold you gently, not crushing, but cradling. All those years, all those people, all those prayers and hopes and fears, they've all passed through this place and passed on. You will too. This is okay. This is how it should be. Everything passes, including this moment, including you, including, eventually, even these stones. But right now, in this moment, you're here. The temple is here. The connection is real. Rest in that connection. Rest in the knowledge that you're part of something that began long before you and will continue long after you. Rest in the temple's patient stillness, its enduring presence, its witness to the passage of time and the persistence of beauty and meaning. The stones are silent now. The night is deep. The world is still. And you're drifting, floating, releasing into sleep as naturally as the temple releases the day's heat, as inevitable as the sun's setting, as peaceful as stone resting beneath stars. Sleep well, dreamer. The temple watches, as it has watched for 9 centuries, as it will watch for centuries more. Sleep in the shadow of eternity, protected by stones that remember everything and nothing, that hold the past and ignore the future, that simply exist, moment by moment, being themselves. The last conscious thought? Gratitude. For this day, for this moment, for being alive when Angkor Wat still stands, for being part of the story, however briefly, for rest that comes like a gift, unearned and precious. And then even gratitude fades. Only sleep remains. Deep, peaceful, complete sleep. The sleep of stones. The sleep of centuries. The sleep that knows no time, no worry, no separation between self and world. The temple stands in darkness, patient and eternal. And you sleep, temporary and human, both existing, both real, both exactly where you should be. Good night. Sleep peacefully. The sacred mountain watches over you. The stones remember. The stars wheel. and all is well. Rest now. Rest deeply. Rest completely. Only peace. Only stillness. Only sleep. Good night.